Oh,
hello there. Welcome to the program, Medical Mondays with Dr. O, your interactive health awareness platform. We bring you the thoughts and expert views of health professionals and providing you the information you need to help you make healthy choices for a strong health and a strong future. Another interesting discussion awaits us as we talk to a psychiatrist on toxic relationship. Medical Monday is on Facebook and on YouTube, so you can catch up with all previous episodes of the channel and support us grow by clicking on the like button, subscribing, and sharing the link with friends and family. Dr. Toyin Opesami is a fellow of the American Academy of HIV Medicine, a family practitioner, and CEO of Janassaroy Medical Center in Maryland, and she is committed to changing lives through healthcare, and she has passion for
Medical Mondays. Thank you so much,
Dr.
and welcome to Medical Mondays with Dr. O. Introduction. So it's February, Love Month, Black History Month, amazing month, like every month of the year. And so what other way to conclude this month than to discuss relationships? Because we find ourselves in different relationships, and we've been blessed by an amazing psychiatrist, Dr. Ayodele Ajayi, who is a consultant psychiatrist who has been working with the UK NHS for over 2 decades, used scientific journals in the UK and cited internationally. And how blessed tonight that, it's already midnight in the UK. Dr. Ajayi is a newspaper columnist on public mental health. He is passionate about educating Black communities on nurturing the spirit, but not neglecting the soul and body in the process. He manages a YouTube channel, Tripod Care, where he delivers bit-sized mental health teachings relevant to Black and church communities. I have been a participant of his teachings and I've been blessed. Dr. Ajayi is on the pastoral team of his church with responsibility for the youth church. He is the author of Footprints of Giants, an inspirational book in the Christian personal development and gender. He is a trained mentor and coach and is the founder and executive lead of Mentor into Medicine Mentoring organization that empowers school and college students from disadvantaged backgrounds to achieve their lofty dreams of studying medicine. Dr. Ajayi is the convener of the Mentor into Medicine workshops and Tripod Care Emotional Wellbeing Hub. He is married with 2 wonderful teenage daughters. So, Dr. Ajayi, we welcome you to Medical Mondays with Dr. O. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ho, for having me. Thank you, ma'am, for having me on the program. It's really a delight to be here, and I'm really looking forward to the time that we're going to spend together. And also, I want to thank you for the great work that you do. Hosting a program every single Monday, I can imagine how much time that takes of you, and how passionate you are about really contributing to the well-being of the community. So thank you, ma'am, for what you do. I'm just going to go ahead and share my slides now, and we are just going to go for it. And thank you, everyone who's attended this evening. Right, okay. So that's what we do. So we are talking about toxic relationships tonight, and that's quite an interesting thing. It's February. We all know it's the love month. It's the month where people talk about relationships, and I'm just hoping that tonight we will look at our relationships, and it's not just about love relationships. It cuts across board, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to share some thoughts and some tips, and just have dialogue together as we examine our relationships. The disclaimer, that's already been done, but but usually when I talk in a professional capacity, I will usually just issue a disclaimer that there is no patient-doctor relationship. This is just for public health information purposes. So what do I hope to cover quickly tonight? So what are toxic relationships? And what are the consequences of toxic relationships? Because sometimes we really are in relationships. We don't consider relationships. We don't assess the impact they're having on our lives. But are they really having an impact or not? The reality is that they are. Whether the relationships are positive or whether they're toxic, they are having an impact on our relationships. We look at some bit of research. We look at the toxic relationship red flags, because sometimes I speak to people and the red flags are all there. It's staring them in the face, it's staring us in the face, but everyone can see it except themselves. And that's just because we are the ones in it. What's an objective tool that you can use in actually assessing all your relationships? If you want to put that relationship to test, how do you do that? Boundary setting, because that's the key in really maintaining relationships, maintaining them and keeping them healthy. And then we're going to round up by looking at relationships, some of the resources that are specifically geared at really assessing your relationships, at maintaining your relationships, and also improving them. And then we will then do some Q&A. So what is a toxic relationship? That's the main crux of tonight's debate. And it's really that a toxic relationship is one that can occur anywhere. So it's not only intimate relationships, it's not only spousal relationships, it's not only people who are courting or people who are dating, it's more than that. Any relationship from the playground, which is friendships, to the boardroom, which is relationship that takes place at work, between bosses and subordinates, even between subordinates and bosses as well, to the bedroom, which is the intimate relationships, to the family room in terms of the fact that sibling relationships, parental relationships, there's toxic parenting, for instance, there's toxic sibling relationships, sibling rivalry, all of those things can be toxic. And it's very important that we not just look at toxic relationships as being related only to spousal relationships. So how do you know whether a relationship is toxic? Any relationship that is marked with conflict, competition, and control, or any of these ingredients, is certainly a toxic one. So if you look at your relationship and you can see that there's a hallmark of conflict, competition, control, then you are dealing with toxicity. And the thing about it is, the bottom line, when you look at that relationship, at that friendship, when you get off the phone from that sibling, when you get off the phone from that work colleague, bottom line, how does it make you feel? If you don't feel like value has been added to you, and regularly you feel depleted, you feel unsupported, you feel misunderstood, you feel demeaned, or you feel drained. Sometimes you get off the phone from somebody and you're like, oh my God, I think I just want to go to bed now. Because they've literally drained. Literally, you can almost feel that life was ebbing out of you, trying to maintain your sanity, trying to maintain your decorum as you are engaging in that conversation. When it's like that, then you should be looking closer to see, is this toxic? Now, the other thing is, toxic relationships are toxic because they actually threaten our well-being. They threaten our physical, psychological, social, spiritual, and financial well-being. Because bottom line is that toxic relationships cause chronic stress. And chronic stress, thank God, there are many medically qualified people on this platform tonight, people who are very eminent in their own specialties themselves. We all know that chronic stress, whichever way we cut it, is bad. Is bad for anyone. So that's really to do with, so that I hope that gives us an idea of what toxicity is about. Usually, the way to look at it again is that, you see, when it comes to relationships, a relationship is not necessarily positive except it's a positive one. And I want to say that again. A relationship, the fact that somebody is in a relationship, it's in a friendship or is in a work relationship, it's not necessarily positive, except that thing is adding value. Because really, it's not a given that every relationship is a positive one. And I think that's a point to really emphasize tonight. So what are the health risks associated with toxic relationships? There was a large British study that took place very early in the noughties, very early in this century. They studied 9,000 British civil servants. They surveyed them, and they found out that those who reported just their close relationships, not necessarily their marital or spousal relationships, just their close relationships, that there was tension, there was regular tension, and there was regular contention in their close relationships. They had a 34% increased risk of heart problems. That is huge. 34% increased risk of heart problems in relation to people who had close relationships that were dramatic. You know, sometimes when somebody picks up the phone and you hear the phone ring, you know drama is about to start. And those type of relationships are marked with increased risk of heart disease. Not only so, it's also said that people who had prolonged conflict in their relationship were more likely to report that their health was compromised, and they were more likely to have health-related issues. So basically, this is linking poor global health with a difficult relationship. Chronic stress, as we all know, is associated with immunocompromise. And of course, we know what immunocompromise, we know chronic stress has been linked to cancers, has been linked to gastrointestinal problems, has been linked to ulcers, also heart attacks, are linked to hypertension, linked to diabetes, obesity. The list goes on and on and on. And to think that some of those stresses are actually caused by relationships that we can actually modify to get a better result, that's too much price to pay for not paying attention to our relationships. So other thing that research plays out is that earlier death of both partners is also linked to, so people who, when there is a spousal relationship and the spouses have different ways of resolving their anger, which causes more conflict, they found out that there's increased risk in both partners of dying early. Both partners, not just one, but both of them have an increased risk of dying early, which is also very interesting. We know that relationship hacks, chronic relationship difficulties are associated also as precipitants for depression and anxiety. I can't recount how many times I've been in consultation where the main reason why this person keeps coming back over and over again is because of a relationship hack in their life. Somebody is in their life who is constantly irritating them, and that's why they won't get better. That's why they won't recover from their depression. That's why they got on well in the first instance. That's why they're anxious, and they're never going to recover until they do something about that relationship. So perpetual, the other thing we also know is that the lifestyle of those we are in relationship with can actually help us or hinder us from addressing our own lifestyle problems. So obesity, for instance, alcoholism, addiction, all of those have been associated with either that if your partner is supportive or the people you are in relationship with are supportive, you are more likely to beat those habits and more likely to establish healthy lifestyles than when those people are not supportive. So, for instance, if you are trying to achieve a low sugar diet or a no sugar diet, and you live in the house with somebody who is a sugar junkie, then your chances are really very next to zero. Right. So usually, every time I present, I will usually talk about mental health. And that's because we really know that toxic relationships are related to mental difficulties anyway. So what is mental health? Mental health is a word that is bandaged around a lot. Everybody says, even in the UK, I hear people say he has mental health. Like, we don't all have mental health. Everybody has mental health at the end of the day. It's like saying, oh, she has physical health. Everybody does have mental health, just like everybody has physical health. So mental health is not just an absence of mental illness. It's actually a state of well-being in which an individual is able to fulfill their potential. They're able to deal with the normal stresses of life. They're able to work productively, and they're able to contribute to community. And that's by the World Health Organization. And so each of those things can take a knock and can actually go downhill if we're in a toxic relationship that is not addressed. And it's not just about toxic relationships, it's about addressing the relationship. Because sometimes we find ourselves in relationships, sometimes we can't do anything about it. In terms of we just wake up someday and we find out that, okay, I'm in a toxic relationship, but what do we do about it is the question. Right. So we also do know that mental health is a spectrum. basically there's the healthy health of the spectrum and there's the unwell health end of the spectrum. And that usually in our lives we oscillate between the extreme end of being healthy to extreme end of being unwell. But in the middle of those extremes are coping and struggling. When life, for instance, a toxic relationship can put you into a coping mode in which you are not really at your peak performance, but you haven't totally got to the point in which you are no longer functioning. And when that happens, if you are able to compensate, maybe you have other healthy relationships, maybe you have support of friends or family, you might actually be able to go back to healthy, or at least you might continue to be able to cope. But if nothing is done, then somebody begins to struggle, in which they start dropping the balls. It's like you're juggling several balls in the air. Maybe start missing work, maybe start isolating oneself socially, maybe sleep goes out of the window, maybe the appetite goes downhill, maybe one has started missing work deadlines, and that sort of thing begins to happen. And if nothing is done to compensate further, then the person becomes unwell, in which they actually have a breakdown, either because they have a psychotic breakdown, or they become ill with depression, or they are not able to function. So what are the red flags for toxic relationships? I said earlier that sometimes these things are staring people in the face, but every other person sees it except them. If relationships are about support, there must be something that one is getting back from that relationship. If you are in a relationship in which there is no holistic support, where you are not physically, mentally, emotionally, or either financially or spiritually or mentally supported, then you need to question that relationship. What exactly is happening here? When there's presence of toxic emotions, anger, jealousy, resentment, envy, when that's what brings the drama, that's what brings the control, that's what brings the competition, that's what brings all of those things. When all of those and the conflicts, when all of those are perpetually present, when the relationship draws you from your social support, so there are people, spousal relationships, for instance, or friends who just want you exclusively to themselves. Be my friend and be no other person's friend. That's a red sign. The relationship is such that you are walking on eggshells around them. You don't know what side of the bed they are going to wake up today, and you don't know what word you are going to say that is going to flip and make them flip, and then they just go into overdrive. When their relationship style is such that they are toxic in their communication, sarcasm, critical comments, talking behind your back perpetually, when they never apologize, anytime there's a conflict, it's always the other person's fault except their fault. Apology is not part of the things that is in their diary or in their vocabulary. There's a problem. When there's a concealment, where the social media age, where most people play out their most intimate parts of their life on social media. When somebody is deliberately making an effort, particularly in a spousal relationship, to really hide, not for no genuine reason to hide. I mean, for instance, people who are courting, this person doesn't want you in their circle of friends. They don't want you doing anything, being introduced to them, to their inner circle. Then you should begin to wonder what's happening around there. What's really happening? If I'm that important, what's happening? If they disrespect your values, violence, all of those things are warning signs. Controlling behavior. They send you a text and you need to, if you don't answer the text in 5 minutes, they keep bombarding you with text and text messages until you answer. Even if you are in a boardroom meeting and you are presenting to save your life, you need to answer the text. Otherwise, all hell will be released. So there's what is called the relationship assessment skill, which is by Hendrick in 1988. This was initially a seven-item scale on the 7-item relationship satisfaction scale. However, it's been modified, and research actually shows that it's not just now for spousal relationships, that it actually lends itself to assessment of every other type of relationship as well. And those are the questions to ask. It's on a Likert scale. You rate 0 for extremely unsatisfied and 5 for extremely satisfied. And those are the questions to ask. How good is your relationship compared with most? How much do you love that person? How many problems are in the relationship? Because sometimes the problems are there, right there in our face, staring us in the eyes. It's just there. But we are the only ones that are blinded by it. So in general, how well satisfied are you with the relationship? So, what are the psychological weapons that toxicity thrives on? One of them is bullying. When there's toxicity, there's usually bullying. Many times there's gaslighting. Gaslighting is a phenomenon is a concept in which that person that one is in a relationship with begins to make you doubt yourself. They tell lies about the things you've told them. They replay the things you've told them in a way that makes you doubt yourself, doubt your sanity, doubt your instincts, and doubt your very being. Love bombing is they load you with very quickly. They load you with affection. They load you with attention, but they
1 minute, please. This has never happened. Why did that? Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, all right, thank you. So I was talking about love bombing. So love bombing is that they load you with very earlier on, from the first date or from the first encounter, they start bombarding you with gifts. And the whole essence of this is so that you can very quickly begin to trust them. As soon as you let down your guards and you think, oh, finally, with all those years of sorrow, I finally found my soulmate. I finally found the person who is going to compensate me for all those years of hard luck, all those hard. Then you begin to see their true color, because very quickly they've gained your trust and they then begin to show their true color. And you can see that this is another one down the line. So love, fear and intimidation. Splitting is about eating two people's heads against each other. They basically deliberately play you against your friends, play you against the important people in your life so that you can be isolated. It's taking you away from your support system so that you are then at their mercy. Martyrdom is playing the victim. You had my sense, and if you leave me again, that means you are going to be the 11th one that has left me. The question is, why is everyone leaving? Why is everyone leaving? And then, of course, guilt tripping, very closely to martyrdom. Guilt tripping is about really making somebody feel guilty for drawing boundaries in the relationship. Life is not going to be worth living again if you leave. I'm going to call it quits. Really putting, and that's going to be your fault. So it's not just that I'm calling it quits, but it's on you. But boundaries, the bottom line is that boundaries are not very easy to set for several reasons. It's difficult to set boundaries. Sometimes it's because we haven't got role models in our lives that have set boundaries for us in the past. Sometimes it's because the reality is that, let's face it, who here doesn't like to be liked? Really, we all like to be liked. We all like to be appreciated. Part of the things that we cherish in life is to be accepted, is to be recognized, is to be cherished. So we all like to be liked. And of course, if you are going to set boundaries, sometimes it's going to cause some conflicts. Sometimes boundary setting is going to make you unlikely, unpopular. But that's good, because at least the boundaries are set and then you can save your sanity. So boundaries are limits that we set ourselves and limits that we set to ourselves and we express to ourselves and also to others. And I want to emphasize that it's to self first. We need to set those boundaries with ourselves first before we set it to others. Because sometimes the reason why there are no boundaries is because we don't even have our own boundaries. We don't know what we stand for. We don't know what our values are. We don't know what our limits are. And when we define that to ourselves, then we can define it to others. Boundaries help us to feel safe and comfortable in relationships. For instance, children who don't have boundaries feel like cannonballs that are about to be let loose. And that's why they misbehave. What they are really telling their parents is that I want some boundaries. Children are meant to be boundaried. And when children are not boundaried that way, they become anxious. And that anxious is what people sometimes, parents interpret as that the fact that they're acting out. They're actually crying out for boundaries. Boundaries help us to preserve our energy. And that's both physical and emotional energy. If one is in a relationship or in a community relationship with our community as well, that is leaving us perpetually drained, perpetually unappreciated, perpetually feeling that we are just always catching up, then it might be the time to reconsider. Boundary setting is an ongoing work. It's something that we've always got to be checking in on and making sure that we are working on. And then, of course, there's also boundaries in physical, emotional, work relationships. I want to refer to digital boundaries. Digital boundaries, very, very important. On Saturday, I was speaking at another event and speaking about emotionally intelligent parenting. And I was saying that I listened to a minister recently, and he was saying that because he was finding that he was spending too much time on the screen, he actually installed an app on his phone, which gives screen time control. And at some point, after a maximum number of time, his screen will time out. And guess what? His screen times out, and there's a password that needs to reset that. And he doesn't have the password. His spouse has the password. So he has to take the permission of his spouse to get back on his phone after it's timed out. Somebody thought, oh, that's a bit controlling, but he knew what the damage that his screen was doing to him. That's why he set that boundary that, except I can then convince my wife that I really need to get back on screen, that's out, screen time out for that evening. And that's sometimes a drastic challenge requires a drastic measure intervention. So we've talked about why boundary setting is so difficult. One of the other reasons is because in some cultures, and sometimes in faith communities as well, setting boundaries can be seen as being rude or being unconventional or not playing the ball or not being the brother or sister when you don't set boundaries. But really, when you set boundaries, but the boundary setting is very crucial to our sanity. So in terms of, I'm just rounding up now, in terms of what are the things that are necessary, or what signs can begin to make you feel alarm bells that ring to let you know that maybe you're not very good at boundary setting. If you find difficult decision making challenging, you are always looking to others to endorse your decision. It's good to take counsel, yeah. But if you always look to others to endorse, and when the decision is not popular with others, then you then move the goalpost. It might be because boundary setting is a problem. If you habitually feel guilty about saying no, one of the most profound quotes I've had, a friend actually told me he was having problems setting boundaries, and his friend told him, his boss told him at work, the boss said, hi, if you say yes to everything, how much is your no worth? If you say yes to every request that is made of you, how much is your no worth? And that's the question we need to ponder. When somebody is an oversharer, very quickly they share the most intimate details of their lives. But when it comes to really emotional intimacy, there's a problem. When somebody is chronically taken for granted, or somebody identifies themselves as a people pleaser, or you've evolved so much to adapt to everyone and everything in your life that you no longer know who you are, you no longer recognize the original person that started. Those are really issues. So this material is actually copyrighted by the Harley Therapy, which is Harley Therapy is based in the UK. They are the ones that have this material, and each time I present it, I always say that this is not my original content; it belongs to them, and I appreciate them for doing such a great piece of work and I'm putting it online. This is really about assessing our boundaries, and to find out. It's just a structured way of really looking at whether you're able to set healthy boundaries in your relationship. For instance, do I feel guilty for wanting to do things by myself? Do I feel guilty? Or what are the 5 roles to being my friend? Do I know what values I'm bringing into that relationship? Do I even have what 10 things do I hate doing? So if I don't know what I hate doing, how do I pass that on to my friend or my spouse? How do I know? If I don't know me, how can I share me with somebody else? Okay, so what are the principles of healthy boundary setting? Clarity, just like we talked about. We need to know our values. We need to know the needs that we're bringing into the relationship, the limits that we want to set, and the history. Many times, parental history. We parent like we are parented. A history of maybe traumas, history of abuse. All of those come to play in any relationship. And if we don't recognize their roles, we may or are not clear about the roles that they are playing. Somebody who has difficulty trusting, they don't just suddenly become untrusting. It's because there's something that's happened. So clarity is one. Communication, it's got to be very rational. We've got to sit down and say, these are the boundaries in this relationship. They are clearly communicated. And we set the rationale for the communication and also what the repercussions could be. I'm going to walk away if you keep speaking to me that way. I'm going to end the phone call if you keep raising your voice. I'm not being rude. It's just that this is the limit I'm going to go. Consistency. We are the ones that dictate how people treat our boundaries. So if people flout your boundaries and you don't do anything about it, the message you are subconsciously setting to them is that it doesn't matter. Really, it's just for the camera. I'm just setting those boundaries for the camera. Nobody cares about them. And people will then think that it's their right to take one for granted. Checking in, sometimes, particularly if it's a deeply entrenched relationship, you need to regularly check in and say, we are going to review this in a month and see how we are going. Because this is not just something that is indefinite. If it's not going well, then we need to keep revisiting. And commitment, be ready to take action if required. Sometimes that action will mean walking away, depending on what type of relationship it is. So what are the remedies to toxic relationships? Sometimes it's about staying. Sometimes, and I say this very, 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 very cautiously, there are relationships that one cannot just walk away from. A long-term relationship, for instance, a long-term marriage, maybe walking away is not really the solution. Maybe it's about staying and then looking at securing that relationship, securing in terms of what are the things that we can do to save this situation? What are the things that we can put in place? Sometimes what we can put in place, depending on the type of relationship, is to love at a distance. So we stay, we may secure, but if security is not working, then we I don't know, people will probably know the Lot and Abraham thing. So we keep our distance. We are loving at a distance. For my I'm not going to see this person on the phone. All our exchanges is going to be by email. All our exchanges is going to be virtual. I'm not going to meet up with them. Or anytime I meet up with them, somebody else will be there. It's just boundaries that we are putting in place to make sure that we are safeguarding our sanity and our own health. And then sometimes the only thing, after you tried all, particularly if the damage is not that damaging in terms of other people, children and all that, sometimes the only way to deal with it is to walk away. And then, so I think this is my second to the last slide. So toxicity, is it time to quit? How do you decide? Because sometimes I get asked, when do you decide, particularly for young people who are in relationships and they're wondering, this boyfriend is always taking me for granted, this girlfriend, when do I walk away? These are the things to look at from that person. So you've discussed with them about boundaries. One, awareness. Are they aware that their anger outbursts is affecting you and affecting your relationship adversely? So if self-awareness is zero, the person doesn't even realize that they have an anger issue or that they have an issue with trust or with being paranoid, then that's a problem. Some people are aware, yes, I have an anger issue, but when it comes to acknowledging it, that's a problem in our relationship. Yes, I have an anger issue, but then you deal with it. It's your business, not mine. You are the one that can't handle my anger. So it's your business, not mine. So they are not acknowledging that it's a problem in that relationship. That's a problem. If they are aware that there is an anger problem, they are aware, they acknowledge that it's a problem in the relationship, but they don't accept responsibility to deal with it, it's still a problem. So it's awareness, it's a problem, it's affecting our relationship, acknowledgement, I'm accepting responsibility to deal with it, and fourthly, it's not just lip service, I'm taking action. I'm going for anger management, I'm going to see a therapist, I'm going to see a counselor, I'm talking about this with somebody, and importantly, it's not just that I start the process, but accountability, I actually carry through and accomplish it because there's somebody else that I'm holding myself accountable to apart from me. Somebody, an external party that I'm saying, I'm going for anger management, I'm going and I'm keeping this. So how do you, this is just really about healing from toxic relationships. Confide in a supportive person. Sometimes professional help is important. Count your losses, be intentional about healing. Give yourself time to heal. Take care of the soul. Really acknowledge who you are. Be around people who acknowledge you, who will affirm you. Let some people who are important in your life know that you've been damaged and that their role at this time is to actually nurture you and allow time for healing before you start aiming, particularly if it's a spousal relationship. Allow time for healing before you get into something else. So those are resources. the ones I like to point to, there's a book titled Boundaries, How to Say No to Take Control of Your Life by Henry Cloud. There's also Spotify, the Well and Good podcast, Boundary Hunter. And there are a number of YouTube channels. Stress, this is a stress test. It's a UK site, really very good with stress management. So thank you for listening, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so very much. Oh my gosh. Can you bring back that slide about recovery, please? The one.
Okay, recovery. All right. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think that needs to be put up, there for us.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. I have so many questions, but I have to be, cognizant of other people. We are people of culture.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that this subject is, about relationship generally.
Yeah.
However, in marriage relationship, we were brought up that no matter what goes on, you are stuck with this man. I remembered my mother even told me, he said it in Yoruba, so I'll just interpret into English.
Okay.
I didn't have two husbands, I had one. So it's one husband you're going to have. So it doesn't matter what happens. You stay there and you just take it and you don't tell anybody. Can you comment?
Yeah, that's a very difficult one, particularly when you then ask, when you add, that's culture, when you then add religion or faith into the mix, it even gets more complex. Sadly, the reality is that there are people who have not lived to tell the story. I think it's about, whilst, like I said earlier, it's very important to count the cost. There are children in the relationship. Is this something that can be mended? Because many times the reason why things don't move forward is because both parties or one of the parties refuse to get help. So the first thing I say in a marital relationship is get help. Sometimes people say, oh, I don't want every other person's business. I don't want my business to be every other person's business. But that's because they are not getting help. Because eventually, if somebody doesn't get help, the person's business becomes the commodity's business because everybody's going to know anyway. But if they got help in the first instance, maybe the situation can be saved. So my take on that is that I say that with all caution, that particularly for a marital relationship, I think that people should work hard at it, and it's possible to resolve things if both parties are committed. But sadly, sometimes you have one party who is committed to making it work and another party who is not. And sometimes for the sanity of the other party, for the sanity of the second person, for the sanity of the children as well, who are in a toxic relationship and who have been damaged continually. Sometimes, as a last resort, severance, because there are people who have stayed and they haven't lived to tell the story. They've lost their mind or they've lost their lives. Particularly when violence is involved, when there's a risk to life, I think it's good to consider severance.
I agree with you. I always tell this story to some of my patients who I need to tell. When I was in residency, my first year, a rotation I had in assistant living, I think it's a nursing home type setting. There was this nurse that was brought, beautiful woman, beautiful. She was a nurse. Her husband beats her all the time. And that day was beating her. She wanted to run out through the back door, and he grabbed her dress from the neck and pulled her back. Coming down, she hit her head. She was paralyzed from neck down. My first year, she was hooked to everything, feeding tubes and all, beautiful. All that moved in her body were now her eyes. Just the eyes. Everything else was, gone. My third year, one of our residents was admitted, for medical reasons, and they were looking for somebody to fill in to, the calls. So I decided to take some of the calls, and I was sent back there. And it was like night and day. I wept my eyes out. This little cachectic, all bones. Still, just has become a vegetable, nothing to do for her. And that has stuck with me, that abuse is just not acceptable. In marriage, if somebody is abusing someone, now I would help to move them out, to get counseling. I would not be party for any relationship dissolving, but to move somebody out of, getting into fatal situations, I will move them out and see if they can do counseling. Thank you so much. I just had to share that, we have some questions in the chat box. So if you take this down the slide so that we can
right.
Yeah, it would help, otherwise I'll miss hands.
Right.
So if you have questions and you don't want to ask them, you can put them in the chat box, as Honorable Gustav announced in the beginning, or you can raise your hands and you'll be called upon. So Honorable Gustav.
So we start with Dr. Moses Oduyebu. Good evening and thank so much to our knowledgeable presenter. My question is, how do we enforce boundaries with living parents or in-laws?
Right, yeah. That's also one with a very strong cultural element, isn't it? Yeah, I think the first instance, it's possible to enforce boundaries and still be respectful about it. And I also do think that when it comes to in-law matters, it's usually best, in my view, for the person to deal with their family. So if it's going to be boundaries, if, for instance, my parents are living in my family, I think it's my responsibility to actually, I agree the boundaries with my wife, but then I'm the one that communicates that. Of course, we know the type of culture most of us are from. I don't want my wife to be blacklisted, that she's the one who is controlling her. You see, you know the way it works in our culture. So I think that would be the first thing. We agree on what we are going to do, but then I'm the one that fronts on behalf of the family. I deal with my family. She deals with her family. I think that's, and I think it's really about helping the parents also to see the reason why it's important to lay down those boundaries. I mean, for instance, a typical example, maybe the parents-in-law live in, and as a result of that, maybe the children go to school, they come back from school, the parents-in-law, the parents feel that, they can flout bedtime rules. And when you tell the children to go to bed, parents-in-law think, let us stay, no, but it's about really letting them see why the boundaries are there. That really this is going to affect their schoolwork. They're going to be sleeping at school the next morning, and when they're sleeping at school the next morning, the social services are going to be interested. So it's just more than, because sometimes it's about people not understanding also the implication of the boundaries and the impact that it could have. So I think that's the way I would answer that.
Thank you very much. Dr. Ajayi says, thanks, Dr. Ajayi, for the very informative presentation. Please say something about codependency.
Right, okay. So a codependent relationship is one which both parties have they are dependent on each other, but they play out on each other, and their impact on each other is not very positive. So basically, both people are dragging themselves down. But they also thrive. They are together, but both of them are weights and dragging each other down. And a number of times, people don't realize that, because a lot of codependent relationships have existed for a very, very long time in such a way that people are not able to really decipher what's going on. Codependent relationships sometimes it's really about, for the person who realizes it, maybe they go to counseling, or they have an encounter and they actually realize that this is toxic for them. It's really about writing down the risks and the benefits of this relationship. What am I getting here? Do the risks outweigh the benefits? What's here? What's in it for me? If the risks then outweigh the benefits, why am I still continuing to coexist like that? are there things that we can put in place to make sure that we are not in this state? Do we need boundaries? Do we need geographical boundaries? Do we need emotional boundaries? What do we need to put in place? And sometimes, depending on whether it's a friendship or whether it's not a relationship that's going to have severe impact, do we need to call it quits?
Thank you so much. On the remedies, you stated staying, securing, separating, and then severance. What role is or does counseling play in each of those 4 stages?
Yeah. So I think when I'll start with. Okay, right. Okay, so I'll start with stay. So obviously, I think staying is not something that one will take for granted anyway. So stay is not something that one would take for granted or cautiously. It's got to be done with contemplation. If the risks the benefits outweigh the risk, then okay, stay. However, at some point, and the next stage would then be, how do we secure this relationship? And in securing the relationship, I think that's when the counseling comes in. And it takes 2 to tango. If it's a marriage, for instance, I think both parties need to be going for couples therapy. If it's a friendship, then maybe it's just the person who's realized that needs to go for counseling. And maybe with the help of a counselor or with the help of a therapist, they can actually set healthy boundaries that can help them to maintain their relationship to the point to which it doesn't cost them their health. And if all of those fail, then maybe that's when one can start thinking about putting a gap in place or walking away completely.
Loving at a distance. I love that. But there's my aunt, Auntie Susan Oshifade said, "Is it severe or sever?"
Yeah, I think it's sever. Yeah. As in, to go your separate ways and just okay, separate things forever. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, Ma. Yeah.
Thank you. There's a question from Tai Doherty. Are codependency necessarily bad? And can you have a codependency with your parents?
Yeah, I think, like I said, it's about really looking at that particular relationship and counting the risks and the benefits of it. So it's possible that there's some benefits in existing together, and maybe financial, emotional. So which might not necessarily. I think it's when somebody is hurting or there's harm to one person, that's when there is a challenge. And usually that's when it's mostly used anyway. That's when people talk about,
So I have a question. What if it's a relationship that is not even a relationship? Hypothetically, somebody that you don't even have a relationship with, but for whatever reason, they're picking, it's just become a toxic relationship because it's like picking at things that you don't even have a clue at. You don't even have a clue about. How do you deal with that?
I think so. I think it's about reframing. Reframing is one of the strategies that one uses in dealing with stress in psychology and psychiatry. Reframing one's thoughts. So if it's not somebody I have a relationship with, maybe they're always picking on me, I can reframe my thoughts about it. Because I'm protecting myself, I need to get to the point in which I say, this is not my brother, my parent, or my wife, my daughter, or my son. This is not somebody that I really need to have a relationship with, and this is not somebody whose opinion should count for me. So one of the things I can do is to actually assume that their opinion does not count. It's a mindset. It's something that I'm doing. Yes, they can do anything they like about me, but I'm coming to the point in which I'm insulating myself And the way I'm insulating myself and protecting myself from that harm and damage is to actually say, I'm sorry, I do not care. Not because I don't care, but that's the only way I can protect myself. So it's reframing the way I think about that.
Reframing.
Reframing one's thinking. It's a change of mindset. I reframe the way I interpret that toxicity. I'm actually saying it doesn't. Your opinion doesn't. This person's opinion doesn't count to me. No matter who they are, I'm not in a relationship with them. So why should I allow them to cause me so much grief and aggro?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so
actually, somebody asked me that question. I read it I read it to you.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Emmanuel Boyega say, thanks for the effort. Session really a blessing. Cultural and religious concerns addressed. My pastor would wish I didn't attend this. And let me quickly add that when it comes to issue of marriage and divorce, does religion or Christianity and pastors push it to the extreme?
Was that a point, or were you asking a question?
It was a question.
Oh, first question. Yeah, I think it's I think it's an interesting one, because I'm putting on two caps here. Here I'm as a psychiatrist and a pastor as well. but the reality is that, being very blunt, I think that as ministers of the gospel, I think that it's important for us to know our limits. I think that sometimes it's important, it's okay to encourage people to get professional help as well. It's interesting you say that. Last night, I was dealing with a case like this where somebody was saying, actually, that somebody who was senior in church was saying, I've told my pastor that, yes, you can counsel, but I think that these people also need some sort of professional help, and I'm going to insist that they get it. I think it's important that ministers, we come to the place in which we appreciate our boundaries.
There's a follow-up to that question coming from Dr. William Craig. Says, when one of the partners stays within a toxic relationship because of their religious belief against separating, how does one help them?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, because it's difficult to help people to make up their minds when they're adults. It's sometimes you can only watch from a distance and support them and hope that the penny drops before a lasting damage is done. Because it's a tough one, but sometimes it's the best you can do.
Thank you so much. Augustine Nwambuze, good evening, doctor. In the case of second marriage, where the children of one partner are not welcoming to the other partner, how do you deal with that? Counseling or ending the relationship? What do you suggest?
Like I said, my premise is always that, particularly when it's a marriage relationship, I think it's a very sacred relationship. I think it's one that should be nurtured as much as possible, and one that one should pay a sacrifice for, because I don't think there's any marriage that works without sacrifice anyway. And because it's a second marriage as well, so there are two children who've already experienced some sort of trauma, and now, so I think it's possible to have family therapy to address these issues. I think that family therapy would be a way forward, because it brings everyone together, and everybody can see what impact I'm having on you, what impact you're having on me, and we can all make a decision that will make this work.
So I have a question to follow that. Africans and mental health. I want to say, no, let me retract that. Black people and mental health, and I don't care what kind of Black people are. It's like taboo. The diagnosis of mental health is not accepted. There's a stigma against it.
Absolutely.
Counseling is forbidden. And you know what? I hate, I'm not going to be a hypocrite, me included. I'm a physician, but you know that it took my children pounding and pounding me. They had meetings. Oh, my kids know how to have meetings. All about meetings and came home, brought and said, look, seeking counsel, just talking to somebody should not be taboo to you. You recommend it to your patients. Yeah. Why don't you talk about it? And I said, I'll become the counselor's counselor. Now, why should I go? And my youngest son is a lawyer, said, Mom, you had 2 dogs when you were a teenager in Nigeria, and they died 3 days apart of rabies. It was one miracle of God. Suru, my dog, refused for me to hug her and was backing off, red-eyed, and just backing at me, but backing off. Will not bite me. I still think about that today and say, that must be God. She died, and her son died after that. But he reminded me how the son died, because when the son also showed signs of rabies, my dad had to shoot him. But do you know, I forgot. I blacked it off my memory that happened. And when he reminded me, I broke down that, well, is this how I have been handling situations? Just black it off. Didn't happen. What do you say about we Black people opening up to the fact that we need to take care of our mental health? It's okay to go to, how do you approach that? What do you say to that?
Yeah, that's something I regularly have to deal with. And one of the things I say is that I found out that there are a number of stereotypes that causes people not to prefabricated ideas about mental services that causes people not to seek help. One of them is that people think that they're going to be blacklisted, but that's not correct, that it might affect their professional life. These days, the rights of people with mental difficulties is so entrenched in law that employers are no longer able to easily discriminate. So that's not really an issue. And the other thing is that in our culture, we are usually very secretive. I don't want my business to become other people's business. And the way I usually say that is, address that is, if one is secretive now and one is covering what one should seek help for, if one seeks help early intervention can actually resolve the situation that somebody's business does not become everyone's business. But if that situation is allowed to get out of hands, eventually, what people don't want other people to know will become the community news. So it's actually better to seek help when one can still be in control and contain the situation. And of course, the other one is that people think that, if you seek help, if you get counseling, they don't understand me. That's not correct, because there are people of our kind who work in mental services. I usually say, look at my face. This is who I am. I work in that service. So there are people like me who work in that service, who understand how you think, who understand your traumas, who understand your social and cultural background, and who can relate to that and adapt their interventions accordingly.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I have my sister Rosemary raising her hand to ask a question. She's actually a counselor also and a life coach. Please, thank you.
So, Dr. Ajayi, thank you very much for the great information that you have given to us today. When you talk about relationship, like marriage relationship, marriage is not the problem. Marriage step is not the problem. It's the individuals that are in the marriage.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, from the beginning, they did not even know who they are before they got know who you are. We all came from a very broken background. We have dealt with our own issues. we end up, attracting somebody else that has
Absolutely.
similar things like us. And then we get into that relationship, it becomes very, very toxic.
Absolutely. That's true.
Okay. So, going to marriage counseling is fine. When people come to my practice and they are couples, I usually separate them, bring them together at the beginning, and then I separate them and I work on them individually. I help them to find out who they are. I help them to deal with their own self-esteem, because their self-esteem is bad. That's the reason why they're in a toxic relationship. So once you're able to take care of that self-image, you get them to a point whereby they can stand secure, they can have a healthy self-esteem, because a healthy self-esteem is when you can stand secure in your person. Why going through a devaluing and rejecting situation? Not everything that they say in a marriage that's going to be causing a conflict. So if you know who you are, you choose your battles. You know what I'm saying? So we parents bringing up children in the house, let us help them to set boundaries. Set boundaries for them, because what the children are experiencing in the home right now is how they're going to face the future. So we have to be mindful of it. I'm a single parent. My kids are, they are grown now. There was a time I had issues with my daughter. I'm in the practice of, helping young adults, and my child was out there doing the wrong thing. But guess what happened? I checked myself into counseling also. First thing I learned in school was that a counselor, a therapist also needs a therapy.
Absolutely.
There's no shame about it, because there are some areas in my life that I can't even see that somebody else can shed some light in. So let's forget about this stigma and everything. And take care of your mental well-being. Very, very important. Otherwise, it's going to end up, destroying the generations to come. So that's my. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for all you do. You won't believe how many people have sent to her that she's taken care of for free and changed their lives. So I have some questions for you. How about the medication part, which affects the mental being further? I guess this question may be about side effects of medications.
Okay. Right. Yes. So the way to look at that is that medication is usually not the only things that we prescribe in mental services. That's one. But sometimes medication is crucial. And they are usually prescribed very cautiously. There is hardly any cases that I've treated that it's only medication that I prescribe. In fact, it's almost never the case. So it's usually medication, it's usually therapy, social intervention, family intervention, helping people to get employment, vocational services, day structured activities, all of those things into one. But in terms of the side effects of medication, yes, like diabetes medications have side effects, antihypertensives have side effects. There is even water has side effects. There's water toxicity. So really, there's nothing that doesn't have side effects. It's about getting the right one and working closely with the prescriber until one gets which one that's right, and one can then get the benefits from it. So adverse effects of medication should not be a reason not to take medication if medication is indicated.
Fantastic. I also would like to add that we have testings now that actually, just by swiping inside gene site testing, they will use your DNA to figure out what medications will work best for you. So that we're not groping in the dark.
Absolutely.
Great. So So I have another question. What do you do in a situation when your spouse thinks she's always right in a relationship and anything you do is wrong unless it is according to his belief and personal interpretation of the Bible?
Yeah, I think that sounds like there is a need for a third-party help there. it sounds like there's an impasse, there is a stalemate, and a third objective person needs to intervene in that situation. And it's usually the best person, I think, is somebody who is trained to deal with relationship problems and to help who is objective. They don't have any emotions or sentiments involved. They're just doing their job, but they're doing it passionately.
You know what? I hate to ask this, but I'm going to ask. for this person, for this question, you are a pastor and you are a psychiatrist.
Okay.
You are a perfect person to, intervene here. So just in case somebody reaches out, I'll be calling you. It's all I'm trying to say. I'll be calling. So,
yeah.
So what did you say? You were going to say something?
No, I was going to say that's not a problem. Sometimes people call me and I take things on. Sometimes I actually also do find a colleague who is actually even more suited to take them on. So, but one way or the other, I'm sure that things will move forward. I believe that.
Thank you. I much appreciated. So, Dr. Bill Craig, I'm going to ask you to please unmute, sir, and ask your questions. You have multiple questions on the forum, and I couldn't put them together very well.
It was interesting. I did have a patient who was, I'll even say misled by his pastor, who said, "Pray and you will be healed." And the patient withdrew from treatment because he started praying. And after he missed 2 or 3 days, I called the pastor and explained to the pastor that he's following your statement, your edict. He withdrew from life-saving treatment.
Okay.
And at this point, I'd advise him to speak to the patient. He did, in fact, leave his office after the phone call, went and got the patient and brought him back to hospital for treatment.
Brilliant.
Which was extraordinary to me.
Yeah.
Sometimes pastors will just say, well, let them keep praying at this point. Prayer is wonderful. We know that. There's no question about that. We cannot deny that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in a case where life-saving treatment takes place, we need to have that understood, that relationship. Now, would you say the pastor was toxic in terms of his relationship with the patient? I don't know. You tell me. You tell me.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you, Dr. Ajayi. Your information is fabulous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Much to think about. So, indeed.
Thank you, sir.
Well, so I have a follow-up question to the question I asked before about medication. But the medication affects the sexual libido.
Yeah.
The medication affects the individual whereby they have no feelings towards people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's indeed, like you said, that sometimes now there is genome studies in which we can actually do a swab and we can find out what's going to work for A and not work for B. The other thing to say is that actually there are different types of medication, different types of antidepressants, different type of antipsychotics in the market these days, that one will be hard pressed not to find one that will control somebody's symptoms and also equally be well tolerated. So it's about working with the prescriber. There are certain things that can be done. Either that can be a switch, or that could be a reduction in dose, or one could even change from one group of antidepressant to the other, one group of antipsychotic to the other. But the important thing, I think, is to always collaborate with the prescriber. It's usually the challenge that tends to exist is that people then feel bashful. They don't feel confident to speak to the prescriber about what's happening, and they then stop taking medication, or they don't take it as it should be taken, and that's when things get pear-shaped. So it's important to communicate with the prescriber, because we also do know that those things happen. If somebody is telling me that what I've prescribed is causing trouble in their relationships, obviously I know it's not doing the medication is not doing its job, and we need to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So working with one's doctor, not even in mental health alone, in every disease.
Yeah.
Very
I'm
important.
ready. Yeah.
You know, a good prescriber or a good physician, clinician, when they prescribe medications, will usually mention the major side effects.
Absolutely.
Possible major side effects of the medication. So that if you have it, you call the prescriber. Sometimes they will say, if you have this, like in statins, stop it right away and call me. If you have muscle breakdown, muscle pain or something. But in others, they'll say, just contact me. If you're taking a medication that changes you, where you're different, then that's not what we intend the medication.
No.
And that can happen. But if you don't communicate, then the prescriber does not know. So please communicate, and that can be fixed, because there are usually other choices or something else that can be added to treat that particular side effect.
Condition. Yeah. And I wanted also to add to that brilliant way you've answered the question, Dr. O, that it's also the risk. Many times prescribers will usually even ask specific questions. So it's good to be confident enough to just let them know what's happening, because sometimes people even hold back as well and say, they are having the problems, they are having the adverse effects, but they don't confide in their prescriber. So the prescriber is not able to do anything about it. So.
Thank you. So, Pastor Dr. Ephraim said, forgetting to ask timely questions and not being curious about your partner's heritage, culture, or religious beliefs can be a problem, right? Failing to timely inform or seeking vital info before the game starts are partly our problems. Just few thoughts. Yes, just in line with what our counselor Rosemary said. That is. So what's your take on that one?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think that particularly for our young people as well, that it's important for them to have these conversations before their relationship gets so far gone, where they are so emotionally entangled and they haven't really built a foundation that is going to carry them. So it's important to have those conversations in a very frank, open, and transparent way, because if one holds back anything, it's going to come back anyway. At some point, it's going to rear its ugly head. For instance, one that I usually encourage people to talk about is trauma. If somebody's experienced trauma, childhood trauma, particularly also trauma of an intimate nature, if that's not addressed before one goes into an intimate relationship, it's an explosion waiting for the trigger. It will explode at some point.
Thank you. So I have a question here. When mental illness requires medication management, what role does blood work play in averting blood toxicity?
So what role?
What role does blood work play? Labs, blood work.
Okay. Okay, right.
In averting blood toxicity. Do you call it labs or blood work in the UK?
Yeah, we call it lab.
What role does labs play?
Or pathology.
We call it labs too sometimes.
So yes, that's very important as well, because usually for things like lithium, for instance, regularly for clozapine, for lithium, when we prescribe those medications, they are because we know they are potentially toxic and they have a narrow therapeutic range in sense of there's only a very narrow place in which, when they're in the blood, they can be effective. When it's less than that in the blood, it's ineffective. And when it's more than that in the blood, it causes serious damage. So lithium, for instance, clozapine will be, and even other antidepressants are very closely monitored. Before we start the medication, we do the blood works, including an ECG. And then we continue to monitor regularly, looking at levels to make sure that it's not toxic. We also give information to those who are taking the medication to make sure that they are aware of the signs to look out for, so that also even warning them about things like when the weather becomes so warm, that they are dehydrated, they need to take more fluids. All of those things, or when they travel to tropical countries, they need to take more fluids. All of those things is the responsibility of the prescriber to give that information. And these days, we actually not only give verbal information, we also give written information so that people can take it away with them and digest.
Thank you so much. So true. We're doing our best. And you guys, oh my gosh, I have to stop to say thank you, Dr. Ajayi, to all of you, all healthcare professionals, all of us, but especially psychiatrists. And to Rosemary here, that I know is also, doing, counseling and all of that, because this season has been very interesting and a lot of mental health has reared their ugly heads. So I have another question. Severance in a toxic relationship is not an easy pill or prescription for some in abusive relationship. As such, varieties of abuses have been normalized by the receiver. How should a therapist approach such client? You are muted.
Okay. Right. Okay. So that's when the person has normalized a toxic relationship.
Yes. When the abused even becomes protective of the abuser.
Yeah. Stockholm syndrome.
Yes.
Yeah, Stockholm syndrome. Yes. So there is a recognized syndrome in that regard. So Stockholm syndrome, in which the abused begins to empathize with the abuser. I think one of the ways that a therapist can do that is to actually help them to be objective. So using structured skills, structured measures to actually look at this relationship so that in black and white is there in front of them. They can see the figures and they can see the damage written in black and white. When that happens, I think, and I suppose the other thing is to be empathic, to really understand why somebody would take sides with their aggressor, and to give them the space of time. It's not going to happen overnight when the penny is suddenly going to drop. So sometimes one has to hold the hands of those people. In fact, I would say that the most important thing in that relationship would probably be to hold on to them in the therapy, to make sure that they keep coming to the points in which the change, the revelation, the insight develops, and they can then move on.
Thank you. So, Auntie Tawa, you have your hand raised, ma'am. You can unmute and ask your question. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Dr. Ajayi.
Good evening, ma'am.
If someone is using a defense mechanism
Okay.
to save themselves, and on the long run, they found that that defense mechanism is affecting their long-term memory, can it be reversed? Like repression, if you are repressing something, and they found that even something that they don't want to repress is being repressed. How can you reverse that?
So yeah. Thank you for the question, ma'am. I think repression is a primitive coping mechanism. It's not a particularly healthy one, because the repressed emotions would rear their ugly head one way or the other. So it's really about helping the person to recognize the repression. It's about allowing the person to recognize the repression, but also to help them to equip them with skills to develop healthy coping mechanisms. Because one cannot just say, get rid of the repression. There must be something else that they need to use to deal with that situation, because there is a reason why they are repressing. So it's about helping them to develop, and I think that's the role of the therapist as well, to help people to develop other skills which are healthy in dealing with the repressed memory. And indeed, when that happens, the memory should improve. But because we also do know, for instance, that there are certain other conditions that are associated with memory loss anyway, that are associated with what is called pseudo dementia. For instance, we know that when people are depressed, it could momentarily affect their memory. And when the depression improves, their memory also improves. We know that when people are anxious, for instance, they don't take in the memory. They get anxious that, I'm worried that my memory, they think, the memory is failing. But in actual sense, somebody is anxious. There are two dialogues going on. There's the inner dialogue and the outer dialogue. The outer dialogue, the inner dialogue is interfering with the outer dialogue, that the outer dialogue does not even register at all. So there's no memory laid down. But people then require themselves to bring up information that they didn't even lay down in the first instance because they were so anxious.
Auntie Tower, is your question answered?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ajayi.
Thank you. Dr. Craig, I saw you raise your hand. Is it down now? Is your question answered? You're muted. On mute, you're still muted. There you go.
Okay, actually two questions, Dr. Ajayi. Sometimes as we deal with our seniors, the age impacts the mental state, and without supplying them with all the medications that we know which are available, we try to work with them and understand them, but sometimes a disgruntled young person ages into a disgruntled old person. And that becomes a very difficult thing to handle. And you're actually tiptoeing without, because these are family members now, which you don't want to discard, so to speak. You want to serve them well as best you can. So that becomes an issue. And I'll also say that there was, I'll just comment, actually Sister Rosemary's point was absolutely on the money. Where she spoke about, as opposed to two incomplete persons coming together, trying to make a whole, is almost impossible. Okay. So anyway, those 2 points. Thank you, Sister Rosemary. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure, sir.
Thank you. So I have a question here that says, is repression synonymous with denial?
So repression is really, the denial is denying that it ever happened. It didn't happen at all. Abuse is staring one in the face. It's all there. And the person is saying, yeah, it's the most idyllic relationship. It's the most ideal relationship ever. Denying what's the fact. Repression is actually suppressing, putting the memories back, sort of not. It's like suppressing them in an emotional way. But denial is saying that it didn't even happen at all. You're not acknowledging that it happened. Repression is, yes, you are putting them at the back of your memory, and so that you don't have to deal with them. So it's like, so repression is sweeping them under the carpet. Denial is saying it didn't exist, it didn't happen.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that comparison. Dr. Ajagbe, I don't know why he's not asking himself, but he says, please say something about the role of insecurity in toxic relationships.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that question, sir. Yes, I think insecurity is a very powerful thing, and I think that until it's dealt with, that person will probably continue to replicate toxic relationships because they are trying to find from outside what they need to find from inside. And no person is able to fulfill the type of demand that they are bringing to the table. So the person will never be good enough because of and I think it's about really dealing with the reason why there is insecurity. A lot of insecurity comes from childhood experiences in terms of early childhood experiences, education, exposure, and so education, exposure, and early childhood experiences. And I think that for such people, it's important to actually go to the roots. It might take weeks or months of therapy to do that, but it's important because for as long as somebody is insecure, nobody's going to be able to meet their needs in the way they want their needs met, their emotional needs, because what they're bringing to the table, I need to make peace with myself before I can make peace with somebody else. I think that's a very easy way to put it.
Very true.
Thank you so much.
Let's pick some comments. Dr. Mary says, thank you so much for such an in-depth session on toxic relationships and signs we may use as indicators. I will catalog this session into my wellness arsenal for the future, as well as my own holistic mental awareness management. Again, thank you so much. And Dr. Opeyemi says, an interesting presentation. Thank you, Dr. Ajayi.
Ajayi. I love that. Ajayi, I love it. Oh, I have another question. But Rosemary has her hand up, so you get it first. Go ahead.
Okay, so what I want to say is that we as human beings, we are made up of spirit, soul, and body.
Mm-hmm.
The soul consists of mind, will, and emotion.
Emotion, yeah.
So we got to take care of that, otherwise, just know who you are. Identity crisis is the biggest problem of the young adults right now, even parents. I do not coach a child that is still with the parents in the house if the parents are not involved in the counseling, because the parents need help,
Mm-hmm.
So before they start pointing fingers on their children, they should take care of themselves first of all, because the kids are picking up a lot of thoughts from them, at home. So we made of spirit, soul, and body. Let us take care of our soul, which consists of mind, will, and emotion. Very important. Can you imagine this? When people die, they will say, may the soul rest in peace. So when the people are alive, where is the soul? The soul is all over the place, running from one place to the other, trying, to be like Mr. A, to be like Mr. B, and all the rest of them. We don't even take care of our soul. And that's where the problem is coming from. So may God help us.
Amen. Wow.
Amen.
That is deep.
Amen.
Yes.
Amen. So I have a question that says PTSD with a geriatric population is multivariant. War veterans, on the other hand, has a different type of struggle outside of age alone.
Mm.
If both of these struggles are in one person, how does a therapist effectively separate the issues? So this is the issue of PTSD with a geriatric population.
Yeah.
And then the war veterans who have PTSD also.
Yeah.
And now they are aging, combining it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a very complex situation because there are so many things coming into play here. But I suppose that's why it's important in terms of the skill of the therapist and the experience of the therapist as well. Sometimes also having a very thorough assessment of the situation, it will be very key. And I also do think that one of the things that we very much that helps over here in the UK, I'm sure it's probably the same in North America, is also to have peer support and supervision in supporting, in dealing with, in managing this type of situation, because it's not a very easy one. It's not a very straightforward one, and one might need to be actually consulting with people to, for instance, are skilled therapists who are who are specialized in geriatric, who give therapy to a geriatric population.
So counseling will be the bigger part of that.
It will. But it's got to be by somebody who's very highly experienced, and particularly in those two fields.
Thank you.
I love my job.
I know. And you do a fantastic job. I'm confident that you do a fantastic job. Thank you again for all you do. Dr. Okweyemi says, at what point do you take an issue to be spiritual rather than mental in a relationship?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I get asked that very often. And my response is always that, like when Dr. Ho introduced me, Dr. Ho talked about the fact that the emotional well-being I run is called tripart care, which alludes to what Sister Rosemary said about the fact that we are three parts. We are spirits, we have a soul, and we live in a body. So always, all of the time, I always say that holistic therapy is what works. So one does not preclude the other. And that is always my premise. I think it's a problem when we then try to separate things into silos and say, one does not preclude the other. I shouldn't be saying that don't go for counseling from pastor, or don't go for prayers, because we do know that there is scientific proof that prayer is effective. But then it still doesn't mean that then it precludes of therapy, it precludes medication. It's about adopting a very holistic view. In fact, the Royal College of Psychiatrists is now saying, recently there was a self-survey by the Royal College of Psychiatrists, in which they actually said that 50% of our patients actually say that there's a spiritual dimension to their lives that they will want psychiatrists to begin to explore with them, and that they feel that we let them down by not doing that. There's quite if one goes to the Royal College of Psychiatrists website, there's a spiritual. If you go on the website, I'll just type in the website in a minute. There's actually a spirituality special interest group. If you go on that page, you'll be surprised. It's got a catalog of all the research relating to spirituality and psychiatry. Lots of information on there. Very interesting.
Wow. It works. Thank you. Thank you. That's refreshing.
Yes.
Dr. Craig, you have a question?
The question I ask is, how important, Dr. Ajayi, is a cultural alignment between the therapist and the patient? And I say this just in terms of, say, a young Black male or female goes to a therapist who is a senior Jewish individual who is attempting to provide some kind of counseling, but the cultural differences are in some cases extraordinary. How does that work?
Yeah, I'm sorry to say, sir, that many times it doesn't work. I think many times it doesn't work, and I think that's why it becomes a problem. That's why it comes to our attention, because it does not work. I think that currently, for instance, in the UK here, one of the things that we are being encouraged to do now is to become more culturally aware, to provide a culturally sensitive service. And that cultural sensitive service sometimes will need to include speaking to somebody who is culturally aware, or somebody who is culturally experienced, or somebody who is a member of that culture, or somebody who is a member of that faith organization or faith community, who has a first-hand and insider experience to be able to deal with the situation and to be able to interpret things in the proper context. Because we know, for instance, delusions, a simple definition of delusions is that they are false beliefs that are firmly held, but they are not in keeping with the person's religious, social, and cultural background. So we need to understand what's normal and what's the norm in that person's culture and religious background to be able to interpret this as a delusion. And that's why the other thing I'll say, the other answer that I will give to that question is that I think it's also good that our people, that more people of color should really, in the UK, I think it's a problem. I don't think it's much of a problem in America. I think people in the States, people of color are into therapies, into therapy professions, but not that much in the UK. We are still encouraging our people to get involved. Thank you very much for the questions.
I think we are doing better in the US. We have quite a lot of people. We have Caucasians, we have, Black people. We have, Hispanics, Asians. I think we have those. We're doing well. We need to do better. There's a lot of mental health system. We need more people, across the board. Dr. Ajayi asked another question. Are peer pressure and bandwagoning important factors in toxic relationships?
Yes, peer pressure, young people. And when we talk about peer pressure, people think that it's only young people. But people who are adults as well also suffer from peer pressure. Social media. Yeah. I mean, the way I always say this is, people put their photoshopped, brushed, hairbrushed photos on Facebook and on social media that make them look like spring chickens when they're in their 70s and 80s. And we think, oh my God, there must be something wrong with me. Why does my skin not glow like that? When in actual sense, it's all photoshopped. So it's very important to bear that in mind. I agree, sir, that indeed peer pressure can, and it's really, I think it's about finding ourselves, like it's been said, really sitting down and having a relationship with myself first before I try to have a relationship with other people. Who really am I? Who am I bringing to the table? And to make peace with myself. I usually say to people that I really don't think I flourished until I accepted who I was. This is me, I'm introverted, and that's who I am. I'm not going to start pretending that I'm not. I'm a reflector, and that's who I am, and I've made peace with that. It took a long time, but thank God, I've made peace with that.
Mm-hmm. You are introverted. It's hard to tell.
I know.
I've seen you more than this. You've done phenomenal, because that is part of mental health.
Yeah.
You have done phenomenally for yourself, because you not only, into yourself, recognizing and knowing yourself, as Rosemary said, you impacting others, you're impacting us positively.
Thank you, ma'am.
In hundreds, in groups. Thank you.
Thank you.
See, I like when one is not a hypocrite. Look at that. We keep having the questions coming. Can toxic relationship be generational, and how should this be handled?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Yeah, toxic relationships can be generational, because we tend to parent the way we've been parented, except to become intentional. And I think part of breaking that cycle would then be recognizing that I'm the product of toxic parenting. This is the way it's affected me. And whilst I seek counseling, it's very important for me to also put changes into my life so that I don't perpetuate that going forward. Actually, that's something I've written on in one of the London newspapers. It's called "What Do Children Need to Become Socially? What do children need to become mentally balanced and socially adjusted adults?" It's testifying this paper. So that's something to look out for. I actually express my thoughts about what do our children need in terms of from us as parents, in terms of for those who still have young children, or people who are also grandparents, because sometimes the things that parents cannot do, grandparents can actually compensate, and that impact can be positive to compensate for the losses of the parental role.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ajayi.
Just 1 second. Rosemary has her hand up.
What the children need from their parents? Parents, spend time with your children. Spend time with them, please. And you know what? take care of your own mental well-being so that you can be able to impact them in the positive way. Don't just leave them in the house and think that they're going to raise themselves. No, that's wrong. They don't need Michael Jordan shoes, all these material things that you're buying for them. They need the relationship, have a relationship with them, because once they leave your house, that's it, you have lost it. I see a lot of old people today having issues connecting with their children. You never connected with them when they were in your house, when they were growing up. And before you know it, they will grow up very fast.
I'm just gonna sit here until
Preach on, my sister, preach on.
Yes, before you know it, they will grow up very, very fast. Okay, so spend time with them, please. It's not all about buying new cars or whatever. Even if you have to live in a small place, if spend time with your children. Some people have big houses and the kids are downstairs. They're doing all kinds of things, and you are upstairs. There, you cannot even see what is going on with the children. Please, these kids, go to the jail today. You'll see a lot of African kids in jail. It wasn't like that before, because we've gotten so busy that we don't have time for our children. I see a lot of these kids. They're like, you know what? My mom wants a relationship with me now, or my dad wants a relationship with me now. I didn't even know my dad. I didn't even know my mom when we were growing up. They were always very busy. So spend time with your children. That's number one thing that they need. Thank you.
What about the gadgets? Phones, computers that are now very akin to children. That's what parents give to children to spend time with. What about that? What's your take on that?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, so.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yes, Rosemary, what's your take on it?
Monitor it. You just have to monitor it. Know what they are doing at every given time. When my kids were growing up, I was a single parent. I have a 36-year-old son, and I have a 32-year-old daughter. During the weekdays, I take their gadgets away from them. I only give it to them on Friday, from Friday till Sunday, and that's it. And guess what? I was not out there running after anything. When they get up from school, I'm home. I'm with them. I take them to their practice, to everything that they're going to do. I even sent my children to go to school in Nigeria. Every summer holiday, they will come to America. My children are very Nigerian and they are very American. I spend time with them. I have a relationship with my children. We talk every day. So develop that relationship with them before they leave your home. Please, I'm begging you, African people.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
A comment from Olua. After doing personal therapy, how do you ensure that the work is not undone when you have to interact with family members, loved ones? That is, setting boundaries that are firm but not offensive.
Yeah, I think that's a very important thing. One of them is actually discussing that with the therapist. That's part of the roles of the therapist, to help one to be able to maintain the work that has been done. That's one. I think secondly is also to know how much you need to interact with each person in your life. Like I said, there are people that I would rather interact with by email. There are people that I would interact with by phone. There are people that I will see face to face. It's really about protecting yourself, protecting the work that has been done, knowing that it's like a new baby that's been born, and that needs to be nurtured. It's a new way of thinking. It's a new way of doing things. And also about not feeling guilty about self-care, because I think that sometimes our culture also makes us feel guilty about prioritizing ourselves. The way I see it is that you can't pour out of an empty cup. If you keep pouring out of an empty cup, the cup will run dry, and if you keep pouring, it will get broken.
And we take a comment from Yomi on the issue of parenting. She said the problem sometimes is that children would rather be with their peers than with their parents.
That's our big brother,
Ellie.
Mr. Yomila. Wow. And it's true. At a certain age, right? Especially teenagers. Dr. Ajayi, what's your take on that? You're muted.
Yes, I agree that teenagers, particularly at some point, would want to be with their peers. But I also do think that if from childhood there have been times created to spend time with those children, I think they will still cherish those periods, and that will still really, there's a balance. There is still also time for parental interactions, and I think one of the ways to do that is to actually structure those times. So it could be meal times, for instance. It could be weekends when there's structured ring-fenced time for the parents to actually interact with the children in a quality way.
Thank you so much. And interesting in that discussion,
Yeah.
so informative. But that leads us to our Medical Monday moment.
I have to say something, and I'm sorry, I've been trying to. This is Dr. Swabo.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, ma'am. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm not on camera. I'm on my phone. And the comment, I have to say thank you all for a great presentation, Dr. Tony and our brother who presented. Thank you very much. Yeah, Dr. Ajayi. This is a very important topic and one that is very timely, especially in this time of pandemic. And for us, African Americans, Nigerians here in a foreign land, we are seeing that a lot of our kids are getting lost in the crowd. So that topic about spending time with children is very critical. I would like to offer some of the things approaches we use for our children here when they were growing up. They can't play dad and mom. They cannot play daddy, they can't play me. If they go to daddy, daddy will say the same thing. If they come to mommy, mommy will say the same thing. And if they come to maybe try to get to somebody and say, mommy, can I do this? And I will say, go to daddy. And they will say, oh, daddy, but daddy is going to say exactly the same thing. So, and my answer is, why are you coming to me when you know that daddy and mommy say the same thing? And our rule from day one, my husband said, you see this house here? This house is Nigeria. It's in America, but this is Nigeria. Mm-hmm. So don't ever ask for sleepover. Mm-hmm. And they said, what about our friends? Can our friends come over? My husband will say, we don't want anybody. Every child should stay in their home with their parents. This is your home. We don't want anybody sleeping over, and you're not going anywhere to sleep over. That's one of the things that parents tend to relax when they think, oh, it's teenagers, they're going to their friends and all of that. You don't have any control of the environment where they're going. You don't know what they're going to be doing. You don't know who the friends are, and you don't know their backgrounds. So for me and my husband, we were never proponents of sleepover. So along with what my sister and the rest of the contributors have said, let us treat our kids like little eggs. You don't want them to break, not even a crack. To the point where if you start early, they will get the message. And you're not doing it angrily, you're doing it lovingly. Mm-hmm. They need to know that you love them and that you're there for them. Mm-hmm. And right now, with my daughter having 3 children, my youngest son said to his sister, you better start very early before they start crawling. Yes, sir. Because if you don't start early, they will crawl into the wrong stuff. Mm-hmm. So it is important that we emphasize that with children and that we're there with them and for them, and that we emphasize the importance of why we're doing that. Today, we can look back and say we didn't waste energy too much on the kids. My husband today, we were driving over across from the school where he taught for 33 years. He said, sometimes I feel like I wasted my life here. And then we said, no, you didn't waste your life. We spent time with the children. And we were very happy thinking about that, remembering that by the grace of God, all they tell us is, mommy and daddy, you did a great job. Yes. You don't need to tell us what to do now. Just we can come to you for advice. No. And that is true. So I want us to understand the critical role we play as parents. They watch us, they listen to us, they see what is going on between us, and that's important too. They see how mommy and daddy respond to each other or what they do. That's important. So it's not just telling them what to do, they need to see it in us.
Yes.
So I want to close with that to say thank you all so very much for a very, very important topic and one that has been very well addressed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And I must say that's Sister Christy, husband, Brother Godwin, phenomenal people. They're in Tyler, Texas, where I did my residency. I was there when they were raising these kids, and I was raising mine. We raised them all together. And they're the mother and father of 3 doctors. The 3 of them happily married and in healthy relationships, and the product of she just spoke who she is. And I'm excited that in our community we have people like this. There are still many like that on this forum tonight, like that. And I personally am grateful that we've surrounded each other with phenomenal people, because each one of us is phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this forum.
And on that note, on being phenomenal, Dr. O.
Auntie.
Hi.
Hello,
Yeah,
ma'am.
Raising children is a very individualized process. One home can raise 3 great children and one that is in some ways inadequate. It's in the same home. So there is no cookie cutter on how to raise your kids, whether somebody went to sleepover or didn't go to sleepover. Those are not the defining factors. If you've raised successful children, just jump up and down 7 times and thank the Lord. Yes, and thank the Lord, because there's no one size fits all, because there are many people listening here, and I thank God for all of those who are sharing. But if you're not quite there yet, don't feel incapable, don't feel inadequate, don't feel like you're a bad parent. It has nothing to do with you. There are so many factors that contribute to, I live in California, okay? This is probably where you have the highest rate of suicide amongst youth. And this is from parents who they are well-to-do. They hired nanny, they hired driver, they do everything. They're movie stars. Is it practical that they will be able to spend quality time with their children? No. Because these same children, they enjoy all the accolades that the parents have. They brag about their parents' status and whatever. So it's about balancing things. But not all the people in Hollywood also raise children with challenges like that. But I think one of the things we're missing is it takes a village to raise a kid. In America, everybody stay on their own fence. Even you, if somebody talk to your child one way, you will say, wait a minute, don't talk to my child like that. But you won't say that when we grew up in Africa. Even if an adult tap your head, you know exactly why that adult tap your head. You're not going to get home to tell your parent that some adult tap your head, right? Because you know that that's what another adult would have done. But it is neither here nor there. That same mentality of you don't say those things also resulted in a lot of molestation. A lot of adults molested children, and those children couldn't say a word. We thank God for America, for the liberty and the advocacy and all of the things going on. America is not a perfect environment either. So we just ask God to help us, bless us, to be able to balance both worlds. Thank you for letting me vent.
Thank you, ma.
Thank you so much.
You, ma. That's another mother of doctors in California. We praise God for you, ma.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ajayi, and all those who contributed. We are so grateful. And it's now time for our Medical Monday moment.
Thank you so much, everyone. This was a very needed conversation that we needed to have. And we're so grateful for everyone that contributed and people who didn't and, participated, because I'm sure that we all got something out of this. My moment here is meeting Dr. Ajayi. I have been on his forums, a couple of them, and I was blown off the water each time. I learned so much. And I want to thank my sister. She's my biological sister, my junior one, who introduced me to Dr. Ajayi. She was after me, said, I have to talk to him, I have to bring him on, and we are so thankful. Thank you so much. And Abby, thank you for always being there, for always getting your big sis back. Thank you. You're a gem, Dr. Ajayi, and
thank you, ma'am.
look forward to you coming back. You have to pick another topic and, come, enlighten us and help us get comfortable with this mental health thing. We thank you so much. And I'm going to give it back to you to give us, your concluding words.
Thank you so much, Dr. O, for having me here, ma'am. And I also want to say thank you to the audience. It's been really phenomenal in terms of, I like the fact that everyone is engaged. It's been such a beautiful time. I think the final thing I want to say is that there is something we can do about our mental well-being. And we don't have to be stuck with toxic relationships. If we find that we're in any one, there's something that can be done. It can feel a bit daunting, but there's always the first step, and it's okay to ask for help.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ayodele Ajayi, who has been speaking on toxic relationship. And I can tell you that the audience didn't want this to end. And you can see that from the interaction, the questions that were coming. We're so blessed to have you. And thank you so much for all the contribution. Thank you for participating and choosing to make health and wellness your priority this evening. Until we come your way, same time, next time with another interesting discussion. My name is Christopher J. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.